In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. How you doing? Today, I have a very special guest, David Strachan, very good friend, and he's written what I think is an extremely interesting, but in all honesty, a very sad book about a chapter of American life that I'm quite sure many of us would really rather forget. And unfortunately, its residue still creates immeasurable problems for us today. Before I get to that, I just want to briefly mention a quick news item. As you know, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had her big Benghazi hearing this week. I want to say that I feel that this has been a monumental waste of time on the part of the Republican Party. We also have a situation in Iowa where Dr. Carlson, the famous brain surgeon, has become the leading champion among the fundamentalists, religious fundamentalists out in Iowa. I don't think that that's any great cause for celebration or shock or hysteria, because the Republicans in Iowa have always been known to go for the most fundamentalist, most extreme religious types running in the Republican Party. You've had a few fundamentalist preachers who won, and so therefore this should come as no great surprise to anyone. We'll see how things envelop as time goes on, as this campaign continues. And you might not know, Mexico, the western coast of Mexico, is reeling from the tropical hurricane that has battered her shores. And we wish the people of Mexico well, and our prayers are with them. Now, as I was saying, my very good friend, David Strachan, has his book, and as you can see, it's called Playing the Game. And this picture of this handsome young Air Force officer is my guest, Mr. Strachan. And I am so very happy to have him on our program. I've got a few things I'd like to ask him, and these are questions that I think the viewers would be interested in. So, without further ado, we have David Strachan.
Okay, I pronounce it Strawn.
Strong. I always pronounce it Strachan, which of course that makes me wrong, but you heard it from the man himself.
Well, it's good to be here with you.
Thank you, thank you. Go get right into it. I'd like to know, and I'm sure our viewers would like to know, now, as we can see, this picture was taken, and I recognize the style of uniform.
In 1956.
Exactly, as I would say, about the mid-50s. Now, I guess we'd like to know, what made a young black man from New York City decide to do the ROTC thing and go into the military at that time?
Well, at that time in my life, my family, the brothers, all of us except one, went into the military. And I think my father was the one that thought that was a good idea to give some service to the country in the military. So I joined the ROTC, Air Force ROTC program. And I got through that program and took the tests that were necessary for pilot and whatnot, and I got selected for the pilot training program in the Air Force.
Okay, so that was your goal then originally, to become a pilot?
Yes, I was in the Air Force ROTC, so I decided I wanted to be a pilot, and I was able to pass the tests for officer and pilot and without any problems. And that was what happened.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm sure our viewers would like to know, what college, what school were you going to?
I was going to NYU.
Ah, okay, NYU. Okay, very good. Now, let me ask you another question. dealing with that time and place, and if you would elaborate, at the time that you went in ROTC, had you heard about the racial conditions, especially talking about the South? And did that have any effect on you? Like, did you worry, well, after I graduate and I have my commission here in New York, they might wind up sending me down south? Did that?
No, I had never thought much about that. I had never lived in the South at that time, up until that time. I've lived most of my life in New York State.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't even think about that until I got the awakening in May of 1956.
Okay.
When I left New York, I left from LaGuardia Airport and flew to San Antonio, Texas. And
San Antonio.
I got my first wake-up call when I wanted to stay at a hotel, a local San Antonio hotel, for a night before I reported to the base. And the attendant at the hotel told me this was not a colored hotels and I wouldn't be able to stay there. And but he told me he didn't know where a colored hotel was. So I was standing there in my newly minted Air Force uniform, officer's uniform as a second lieutenant, and I had nowhere to stay. So I said, well, let me call around. And I was lucky enough to call the base, and they had some room in the guest house for that night. So I was saved, and I found a place to stay for one night until the next day when I had to report to duty.
So essentially your chestnuts were pulled out of the fire because of the fact that you were able to get a room on base, as it were.
Yes.
Okay.
Not in the officers' quarters, but the guest facility at the base in San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base at the time.
Oh, so in other words, you were able to get a room as a guest?
Yes.
Not as a commissioned officer?
Well, that brings up another point. On many occasions, going around to various bases, I've been asked what I was doing in the officers' quarters and when I was in full uniform. So people could see perhaps the color of my skin. They couldn't see my uniform and my rank and whatnot.
The rank on your collar.
And I had every right to be in the officers' quarters. So, it's just funny. People can't really see you quite often.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of us are under the impression that President Harry Truman's order to desegregate the military, that was done shortly after World War II. That ended in 1945. His orders came down the pike in 1948. And you're talking about 1956, 57, essentially.
Yeah.
And what happened? Folks that just took their time getting the word?
See, white supremacy racism just doesn't disappear because the president gave an order after being pressured by certain civil rights organizations. The point is the racism just didn't go away, and you can't just give an order and order people to do the right thing when it comes to this issue. And nice of President Truman to give an order such as this, but that didn't solve the problems at that time.
Wow. Okay. As a former military man myself, you can, I won't go into it, but you can imagine what's going through my mind.
Yes, I can.
When you relate that to us.
Even though you were in the service at a later date, I'm sure.
Yeah. Wow. Now, would you say that experience that you had when you checked in at Lackland, did that psychologically gird you, get you ready for, because from reading the book, I understand that your next stop from Lackland was Bainbridge, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. Southern Georgia.
Right, Southern Georgia. So would you say that that first run-in that you had with Mr. Jim Crow in Lackland, Texas, did that prepare you?
San Antonio.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, San Antonio. Did that prepare you for what you were going to face when you got to Bainbridge?
Well, this is the way I see it. With that first assault on me when I was told I couldn't get a room because of my color, that was just the opening salvo. So as you went along in the military, even though the president had given his order in 1948, in many, many ways throughout my time in the military, things came up on a regular basis, racial things. It didn't disappear. So that was maybe my basic training, being turned away from the hotel, the civilian hotel. But so many other things happened in the military to make me well aware that Jim Crow, white supremacy doesn't go away with anyone's orders.
Let me ask you, as you bring that up and you talk about treatment, I'm curious. Now, once you get to Bainbridge, and that's supposed to be home for, X amount of time.
Right, that's a training base.
Right, so that's where you're going to be trained at. Now, how were you treated by your white peers? Now, you're a junior officer.
Yes.
Basically, surrounded by other junior officers. And I'm sure, especially at that time, they were mostly Caucasian junior officers. Your peers, that's your peer group at that time. How are you treated by your peers?
When I got to Bainbridge, Georgia, I was able to get a place off base, and I would drive to base every day. I was, let's say, close to being an invisible man. Practically no one talked to me. My fellow officers, there were no other Negro officers on the base. At that time, they used to call black people Negroes, and in 1956.
Okay.
So the point is, I was the only one there in the midst of, I don't know, maybe 500 or so. I'm not sure exactly what the count was, but no one talked to me. I can't say I never saw one friendly face, but maybe, let's say, 99 unfriendly faces out of 100. So here you are, you're supposed to be in training, and no one is friendly to you. You didn't talk with anyone, and you're supposed to be trained, and you're a student, but you have no other students to talk to about what you're doing, and it's a very hostile environment. You find it hostile in many ways. The way they look at you, if looks could kill, you'd be dead, and the way they train you, basically hostile. In my case, see, so I'm not saying that this is in every case, in every base, anything. I'm just saying what happened to me. And in spite of that, I learned to fly the airplane that we were flying, the T-34,
right,
and I soloed it in a relatively short period of time.
Oh, okay.
But I got in difficulty. I had difficulty because I would do things that weren't expected to be done. in a small town,
Uh-huh.
everybody knows what's going on.
Mm.
So I don't know whether, it got around that I went to the drive-in theater in Bainbridge, Georgia. And, at that time, black people were only allowed to sit in the very back of the theater. And I drove my car into this drive-in theater, and I didn't want to sit in the back, so I drove up to the front and started to watch the movie, and that caused a big brouhaha, and I had to leave the theater for my own safety. They called the management and whatnot. I didn't know the people were hostile, and I had to leave. That's one thing that happened to me.
Okay.
Another thing that happened to me is I had to go on business with respect to my car.
Okay.
I had a 1954 Plymouth at the time, and I was going to get a new tag, as they call it. Up there in New York, you say license plate.
Right.
In Georgia, they say tag.
Right.
And I went in there, and I went to the sheriff's office,
Uh-huh.
and I was admonished because I did not say yes, sir, to white men. The sheriff told me that you have to say yes, sir, when you're talking to white men. And I suppose if you had to say something to a white woman, you'd have to say, yes, ma'am, or yes'm, or yazzle, or whatever, they expect. And I wouldn't say it. And I guess that news got around. And then another time at the base, everything is supposed to be clear after President Truman.
Right.
And I went swimming in the officers' swimming pool. Well, if you want to see something funny, it would be like a rat jumping into the swimming pool and everyone bailing out. That's what happened to me in the so-called, integrated military. So with all those things, against me,
Yeah.
if you know anything about flight training, you can always find fault with somebody.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can go into flight training and get away if someone doesn't like you and finds fault.
Yeah.
So the next thing you know, they started finding fault with me, and it wasn't long before they were able to get me out of the program. So the only black officer on the whole base, they got rid of me, and I was out of there. And you see, so I didn't do too well. I guess I didn't know the game, and that's why the book's title is
Playing
the game.
Playing the game.
You got to know how to play the game when you're dealing with racism, white supremacy, and Jim Crow and so forth. And I don't know how to play the game. Going swimming with all those white guys, they were livid, but they couldn't do anything about it because it was on federal property.
Right.
But they made it known to me that I was not welcome there. So with all those things together, and now news gets around those places, there's a way to get rid of you. And in my case, I was a person who grew up in Harlem, in New York, and I never had any flight training before I went to the flight training program in Bainbridge, Georgia.
Yeah.
No ground school, no flying, no nothing. See, whereas many of those European guys that I was with, I found out that some of them had been flying since they were, little, and some of them had training, all kinds of ground school. I had nothing. So I was in a situation where I was on page 1 of a book, and the rest of the people on page 1,000. So, it was pretty good that I was able to solo in a reasonable time, and got as far. When it came to the academic portion of aviation training, I did very well. I was confident, no problem. But when it comes to the subjective stuff, that's different. I mean, it's subjective. someone can always find fault with you or sabotage you, you see. So that's how it went with me.
So you're a young military officer
Yes.
in our Air Force. And when you try to avail yourself of the things that are there for officers, i.e. the swimming pool, so I guess it would be like an old silent movie comedy, you know. You jump in, everybody else leaps out, you
That's
know,
right.
that
Got
sort
it.
of thing. And with that type of mentality, we are, and I remember reading about the 50s, because I mean I was an infant, but at that time we were locked into a Cold War with the Soviets
Yes.
and with China.
Yes.
And we were the ones that were supposed to be going around the world trying to prove that our way of life was superior to that of our communist adversaries.
That's right.
And that we were trying to go to Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, basically saying, well, come on our side, because we believe in the integrity of every single human being and the dignity of every single human being. And yet you, who had signed on to be one of our warriors, one of our diplomats, to spread this ideology, you seem to have gotten in the fight just because you wanted to see a drive-in movie.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
They called the cops on you for daring to want, not sit in the back of the park in the back of the theater.
Yes.
I find that extraordinary.
Yes, but that's the situation. A lot of that stuff about freedom and justice and whatnot, that's rhetoric. When it comes down to playing the game, you got to know how to play. And I didn't know how to play the game. I thought I could go into the swimming pool. I thought I paid my money, and well, if they want to sit in the back, some black folks or so-called Negroes, but I don't want to sit. I want to sit up in front because I like to see the movie close.
Right.
I thought I
so
could do
I,
that.
for that matter, yeah. So I guess I would have gotten in hot water too.
And I never heard anything where you, because of a person's phenotype, their complexion, that you got to say yes, sir, to them.
Okay.
But that was told to me in the sheriff's office that I had to do that, and I refused to do it. So I don't know. I'm lucky to be here with you today because anything could happen to me.
Yes, that's true. Very true. Now let me ask you, how did you? Because you got married upon your graduation. Okay. How did your wife feel about you wanting to make a career out of the military?
Well, she had no real opinion about it. She was she wasn't opposed to it in any way that I could see. No, not at all. And
okay.
But I guess when I got to Bainbridge, Georgia, that wasn't too pleasant. And
I was going to ask, after she saw the experiences that you were going through, what did she feel about the whole deal?
The point is that she didn't understand those things. I mean, she had no military experience, and she didn't really understand what I was going through. And she just went along with me there, and nothing that she could do that would help me in any way. We just lived there. And then we went on to another base in Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. So at that point, I was feeling very low. After someone tells you, as one of the instructors told me, "Oh no, flying is not for you." That's what he told me. And
did he tell you why?
No. He didn't tell me why. And then at another time when I had a so-called check ride, I made a small mistake, which is not uncommon for pilots to make. This person chastised me and went into, well, that flying's not for you and all that sort of thing. So when someone devalues you like that and makes you feel like you're a subhuman person because you made this kind of error, it just takes a tremendous toll on your feeling of self-esteem, which that was a big hit for me. And it took me a long time to recover from that, see, because I thought maybe this European guy that was the instructor there, he knew what he was talking about, but that wasn't it at all. And that was not the case. So the point is that I felt very low down. I felt very sad about being eliminated. All these European guys are there, and they're doing fine and whatnot, and I'm supposed to be no good.
Okay, when you say European, you mean white Americans?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
European,
Yeah.
I call white Americans European Americans. And just like, that's what I call them.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you something. Where else did the Air Force send you?
They sent me to Japan, and I went to Japan via Hawaii and Wake Island and then into Tokyo. And then I got a real awakening when I got to Tokyo, because I was sent there with a bunch of white guys or European Americans. And the first day I was in Tokyo, after we went to the officers club and had dinner, I went with a group. We went to one of the clubs in Tokyo. And I went to this club with about, I think about 3 white guys. And I think it was 4. And in Tokyo at that time, I don't know if it's still that way, but they would have hostesses who would sit with you and...
yeah, they still do that.
They still do that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And still with you and encourage you to buy alcohol and so forth and have drinks.
Uh-huh.
But when I got there, they had a hostess for each of the white guys
Mm-hmm.
and none for me, you see. Mm-hmm. Not that I was looking for a hostess,
Mm-hmm.
but I saw the behavior of these Japanese women very strange.
Yeah.
So eventually I learned what was going on. See, I didn't know the game. In other words, people from the United States, servicemen, European American or white servicemen, transported their racism
Mm-hmm.
over to Japan, and the Japanese were going along with it. So that was a signal to me that I didn't belong in that club. I should be in some other club where they would
patronize black servicemen.
Servicemen only.
Okay.
See, so in other words, white supremacy travels wherever Americans go.
Well, it's a funny thing.
As far as I'm concerned.
It's a funny thing because now the Air Force never took the opportunity to send you to Latin America or Europe. Then,
No.
Okay.
No, I was at just Japan, and after I left Japan, I went to Okinawa, which is part of Japan.
Yeah.
But at the time, in 1950, in the 50s, it was under American administration.
Yeah.
Under General Hips in the 313th Air Division.
Right. Now, it's funny because when you talk about your experiences, now I can tell you, from my experience, the first time I went overseas, first time I was in the service, was spent a lot of time in Germany. And the funny thing is, what caused the most racial conflict was that the same type of thing happened. You had racist Americans, white Americans, telling the German people, especially the German women, about the negative things about black servicemen. And the problems, and I mean, we had riots, regular riots, and this is in 71, 72. And the problems occurred because, for the most part, the Germans, the Europeans in general, they ignored the racist things that our white American comrades would say about us. There was a certain amount of curiosity, especially when we talk about Amore, but generally speaking, and it's sad because the thing I miss most about being both in the Army and especially being in the Navy was the opportunity to be overseas. And that was one of the few times in my life, personally, where I feel like I was treated like an American, like I was treated like a human being. And I think it's sad, going along, dovetailing on your book here, that a man has to feel that he's at home 3,000 miles away from his home. And I think that says a lot about this, what you describe as this the supremacy thing that seems to be ingrained in far too Americans. I think it's sad. Tell me, what did you do after the Air Force?
Well, after the Air Force, I was discharged from Lackland, and I went to live in Tennessee where my wife was going to school.
Oh, okay. I was getting ready to ask, why did you stay in the South?
I lived there approximately 6 years, and I worked in one of the schools there. At that time, all the schools, the public schools, as far as I know, were segregated.
Right.
And I worked in a school that was elementary and junior high school at that time. And some of the most enjoyable times I've ever had was working with those children in that school, brilliant children in this all-black school. In the schools at that time, white children would receive, for example, new books, and the old torn-up books that the white children tore up were shipped over to the school I worked in. And
that's pathetic.
Yes, but that was normal, you know.
Oh, you said that was the norm?
Yeah, I think that was the norm, yes. So at that time, I'm sure they're not doing that now, but at that time, that's what they were doing. So in spite of adverse conditions in terms of material things that the school got, I was there, and I enjoyed working with those children so much that when I went to work at 8 in the morning, sometime I wouldn't come home till 8 at night or 10 at night because we had an after-school program, and it was just wonderful working with those children. And some of them are so smart, were so bright and whatnot, and I just put everything into it. It was an interesting job. At that time, they did not pay much in the 50s. I think the first year's pay was $3,000. That's all I got. But I managed to live on $3,000 for a year. So, you know, it was not easy.
Woo.
And that's what happened. So I had a love of teaching and working with these youngsters, and it was just a pleasure. And that was a very enjoyable time working with the children. I made the most of that time when my wife was in school.
Now, how did you feel I'm talking about, quality of life wise, because you're still in the South, but you were no longer in the military.
Yes.
How did you feel about being in that area,
Well,
aside from the teaching?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, where I was living, not far from Fisk University in Tennessee State, I had very little doings with European American people. Very little doings with them. Most of my time was working with black children. So I just made out as best as I could. Even though I knew that they had certain policies, racist policies. For example, in my after-school position, I noticed that they paid me less than they paid white people who did the same work after school. That's not something new, where they would pay whites one scale and black people another. So I've actually experienced that. So I know about that, because sometimes checks get mixed up and you find out what somebody else's check is about. See, so that's an interesting thing that happened to me. But I didn't stop. I just went and dealt with that. I didn't make any court charges, anything like that. I just let that go, because I wasn't going to stay there forever. And the point is that I found out in the South, where you have right to work laws, where they're very much opposed to unions, and they got the teachers trained so that the teachers will talk ignorant talk about their professionals, so they don't need any representation and whatnot. I had no health insurance for my family, nothing, no representation. So it was quite an experience working in the South, and that is what I did for about 6 years.
But I guess you would say then that was a hell of a lot better than when you were in the Air Force.
Well, I got much more pleasure out of working with those children, and the thing is, with the Air Force, after they got rid of me at Bainbridge Air Base, I had to recover. So I went, before I left the Air Force, I was stationed in Lackland Air Force Base. I better back up a little. When I left Japan, they sent me to a base in Arkansas. Now, this is very interesting, because Arkansas. This particular Air Force facility had no black officers, none, or Negro officers, as you would say at that time. None. There was a small detachment of maybe I'd say 15 officers, so more or less. And I came to sign in at the base on a Saturday.
Okay.
Now, the base was a very interesting base, because most of the officers weren't there, and the commander wasn't there. So the person in charge of the quarters, passed me the book to sign in, and I signed in. With my orders, I was stationed there.
Right.
Well, Monday morning, the commander, he went ballistic. And not in my face, but I walked into the orderly room. The orderly room was an office.
Right.
And I just happened to walk up to the squadron clerk was at the desk, and he had a letter that the commander wrote. I guess he typed it out. I just saw this letter there, and the letter was about me.
Well, you had just arrived.
I just arrived that Saturday. But the commander didn't know about it until Monday.
Okay.
And I think this was Tuesday, I saw this letter. You know, it wasn't meant for me to see. I just walked up the desk was sitting there, and I looked down, and I saw a letter about myself. And the commander was saying that I shouldn't be stationed there. They should send me to some other place. And, you know, and he went on about that. The commander, he was a major, a little major. Yeah. And he must have sent it to the commanding general. And so they didn't respond. They didn't get me out of there. But I guess they told him, well, we can transfer me at the end of the fiscal year. So that's what they had planned. They had to keep me there from January to about June or July. I can't remember. Yeah. And then they transferred me. But before that, they did all kinds of things to me. The base had a lot of civilians, European Americans, white folks, who were workers on the base. Now, as an officer, you know, you have additional duties. I was a radar officer. I ran the radar center. I took a shift. I wasn't operations officer. I took a shift. And usually it would have additional duties. And all the other officers, when you looked at the chart for additional duties, every officer there had 1, 2, or 3 additional duties. Except, guess who? Me. That's very unusual, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, all the officers have additional duties, but in my case, no additional duties. Well, I surmise that that probably had to do with me. The commander didn't want me ordering around those white people that would be working for me. So I just was blessed with my military duty, and I laughed about that because that's less work for me.
That's
yeah, but they didn't want anybody to have to take orders from me. So I only dealt with military people, and that's one thing that worked out in my favor because I didn't have to do all that extra stuff that those other people had to do because they didn't want me ordering around these people. The other thing is they were so desperate to get rid of me because I was interfering with their social life. They belonged to the country club, and they would have parties at the country club, and their wives and whatnot would go to the country club, and so they couldn't invite me to the country club.
Right.
So they were mad about that. See, so that was another reason they wanted to get rid of me. And they even did things that were extremely dishonest, like being that I couldn't go to the country club swimming pool, or I didn't have any other place I could go and whatnot, so I spent most of my time in the base library, which was a small library on the base right next to the base exchange. And I would go in there and spend most of my time reading. I was a ferocious reader, and I'd go to the library all the time, which was right next to the base exchange. Well, evidently, someone, I believe some enlisted man, was breaking into the base exchange and stealing. And I remember one day I was sitting in the library, right outside the library on a sofa or something. I can't remember exactly what I was sitting on, but I was there usually many times during the week. This enlisted man comes in, maybe it was a E2 or something like that. And
Do you remember what was stolen?
I don't know. I'd never been in the base exchange. I'd never stepped foot in it.
Wow.
Never, not once. I had no reason to go in there. I didn't want anything in there. It was a small one, and I had no reason to shop in there, and I didn't go in there. I'd never been in there once. Next thing I know, I'm called to the orderly room by the adjutant, which is, the adjutant for the squadron, and read my rights. You have a right to remain silent.
Right,
and so
UCMJ,
forth.
yeah, I remember.
That's it.
Yeah.
Read my rights. And, I was asked, would you like to talk to us? I said, yes, I'll talk to you. What's the problem? And they asked me about this and whatnot, about the door being open and, so forth and so on.
Uh-huh.
So, in other words, some little guy, some low-ranking enlisted man can just go and make an accusation against a black officer and get away with it. And then next thing you know, they're reading me my rights. No one ever asked me, did I know anything about this or anything like that. They just, accusing me by reading me my rights. And there was no reason for that at all. But that's what they did. So you never get away far from people who are trying to sabotage and destroy you.
What was the outcome of that?
The outcome, they just dropped it. They didn't have any evidence against me, and other than some little guy with, I think, one stripe on his sleeve, saying he saw Lieutenant Strachan there. He could have said anything, but they were perfectly satisfied to listen to him make an accusation against me.
Number one, we're all fortunate that they didn't follow through with that, number one. But number two, I'm just trying to understand from their side, why bring it up and then just drop it? Apparently, I suspect, because I've seen incidents like that in the past, apparently it was someone that they knew that might have done the breaking in.
That's right. Maybe the same person that reported this to...
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Did it. So he saw Lieutenant Strachan there, and he said, well, let me blame it on this Negro. So even though I ain't got one stripe on my sleeve, I can blame it on him, and they'll believe me rather than believe Lieutenant Strachan.
Oh, man, my country deserves me.
Yeah, see, so I could have been wound up as a prisoner in Fort Leavenworth.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I've seen it happen.
That's it. See, so this type of thing goes on all the time.
My God.
Yeah, see, so that's the situation. Yes.
It's amazing to me that, you didn't leave the Air Force and go work for Moscow or something,
No.
Because I tell you, quite frankly, I would have been sorely tempted. Seriously.
Yes.
For you as a black man to have to put up with that crap. And see, this is after 1948.
Yes.
See, that's what really burns me about that.
That's right.
That's
right.
Oh,
incidentally,
God.
when I was eventually transferred to Lackland, not one person said goodbye or anything. That was it. You see, they were so glad to get rid of me. So it's really something.
How was Lackland, by the way?
Lackland was like a little city, and you'd have racist things happening there too. Walk into BOQ and they ask you what you do. BOQ means Bachelor's Office Quarters, and someone asks you what you're doing there in uniform, officer's uniform. Someone would ask you, what are you doing there? I mean, it never stops. It never stops. But I think at this point I want to add that we back up a moment after what they did to me with the flight training. And I went on later on and I got several flight certificates from the FAA, civilian, commercial pilot, instrument pilot, helicopter pilot. I went to a school and learned agricultural flying, and I graduated as an agricultural pilot. I'm a helicopter pilot. I'm an instructor in 3 areas: airplane, instrument, and multi-engine. You see, so
just
I did that mostly on my own.
right now. Would you say this is just propeller or jet or both?
No, propeller.
Propeller. Okay.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is I had to prove to myself that you know they didn't know what they're talking about and they had some other agenda. So I did all of those things, and then when I came back to New York, I eventually wound up at New York City Board of Education, and I worked with youngsters there.
Okay. That's another part of your life that I wanted to ask you after you told us about your escapade in Arkansas.
Yes.
What the hell Arkansas needs of an Air Force base is beyond me, but that's a whole other story. Now, one of the most interesting parts of this book that I found, actually, it was, I felt like reading that part of it, I always felt like I wasn't properly dressed. I always felt like I should have on my tuxedo and my tie and tails because it was actually just like being at a testimonial. I was looking around for the rubber chicken and the croquettes and what have you, because what your students have to say about you, it should be done on a stage with about 30,000 people in attendance, because looking at what we're dealing with nowadays, especially in communities of color, when we're talking about the lack of leadership, and I mean, let's face it, you know, we talk about those of us who would be politicians, those of us who are deep into the Protestant churches and what have you, the traditional source of leadership, lawyers, they don't hold a candle to the way that you have inspired these students that I've read about. I'm just. What makes you so good? I mean, how do you get these cats?
Oh, that's a good question.
And kittens, because you've inspired a hell of a lot of young ladies as well. Why are you able to get them to do what they need to do? And most importantly, how do you get them to believe in themselves?
Yes.
Come on, let's talk about that.
First of all, people have to know that I operated an aviation program in the New York City Board of Education for nearly 20 years. And this included flight training and ground training. And I am formerly a Federal Administration examiner, and that would help me with those students too.
Tell the folks what school you did that at.
This was at Wingate High School in Brooklyn. Okay. What I did, it was based on the pain that I had suffered, you know, with the experience I've had, negative ones, and my desire to redeem myself and also upend or turn the tables on those people who try to destroy me. So I ran this program, and the secret, I'll tell you what the secret of the program is, or was at that time, a love for the students. That's something that is better than everything. If you love your students, you will do whatever is necessary. Now, I know, Bob, you're talking about reading about my students in a book, and the students you're reading about or mostly airline pilots, military pilots, or
Right.
both, and corporate pilots. Many of them make 200, 300, 400K.
Mm-hmm.
These are black students from the hood or neighborhood or the ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
And these students were mentored by me, instructed by me,
Mm-hmm.
coached by me, or whatever you, however you want to look at it, and inspired for excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to do that. And part of it is letting them know that they can do anything. I'm talking about people that other folks would say, oh, these people are dumb, they don't know anything, and now they're making $400,000 a year as a result of the guidance that they've got in my program. So, I'm very happy with that. Now, I got a call from a friend who's a professor. He lives up in Newton, Massachusetts. He said, this book should be read by every college that educates teachers, as well as those people not only in the primary, secondary, but tertiary schools, public schools, should have this book. This is a tremendous inspiration. It shows what can be done, the greatness of people who are sometimes considered not worthy of anything. And the point is, teaching was only one part of it. I'd say the big part is the mentoring and inspiring and coaching, and that's what I did. So this is all in this book. I had to think about this for a number of years before writing this book, and it came together in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if one day this is not a feature film, what happened in this book. This is a tremendous story, and we still meet our students who are in the program, still have reunions.
Yeah.
It is just a fantastic thing because this is turning the tables on racism, turning the tables on segregation, turning the tables on white supremacy. And when you read this book, or those of you who are going to get the book, and you can get it at Amazon, order it on Amazon, you'll find out no matter where you go, you got to deal with those negative factors of white supremacy, segregation, and general racism. And you'll read the experiences of these students, how they got around all these things. I mean, the stories are just fantastic. So I don't think anybody will be disappointed to see the greatness of people who quite often are considered not worthy of anything.
I was looking at my notes here, some of which I'm just going to toss to the side because you're more interesting. Surely much more interesting than anything I could think to ask you, just you telling your story. But so essentially what you're saying, this whole big debate, like what we got here about education in New York City, the big fight between the charter schools versus the public schools versus the teachers union, and reading about what you were able to do and listening to you speak, I get the impression that that's really a foolish argument, that really doesn't have anything to do about educating low-income people of color. That whole debate between charter and public, it's a bunch of crap, really.
Yeah,
it's about what you do with the students in the classroom, essentially then.
Well, for me, it's not just classroom. Every student that was in my class had my personal telephone home number and could call any time of day. And they still have my number. It has not changed. The point is this. If you want to do something like this, you have to have a love of the people. If you don't care about the people, then you're not going to accomplish much in terms of the performance if you don't do the type of things that I did. Because a lot of these children are very damaged. For example, when I first got to the school, I replaced a white fellow who was the teacher the year before. And when I got to the classroom, all these black students sitting in front of me, you should have seen the looks they gave me. They weren't friendly looks. You know why they weren't friendly looks? Because they felt shortchanged because they did not have a white teacher. And I heard one of them say, "Look who they sent us now." That's what he said. And for the time that I was there for a couple months or so, I had to prove that I was even a pilot. They couldn't believe I was a pilot. I guess they never met a black pilot. And it was just hard at first just doing that. And so it's a very difficult case to cure someone who is extremely damaged. I mean, some cases are extreme. Like one boy said to me, to the administrator, he went in to complain about me because I was teaching something about black pilots. And there's a black boy. He said, "No, I just want to know about white pilots." Now imagine how sick it is and how internally oppressed someone is that would say something like that. He doesn't want to find out about anybody like himself, but he just wants to know about white folks, and he doesn't care anything about black folks. You see, so that's an example of the type of sickness that is also oftentimes visited among children living in the neighborhood, in the ghetto.
Well, as unfortunately I had to keep glancing at my watch.
Yes.
Time flows much too quickly. Let me ask you this,
Yes.
to sum it up, and this is one of my notes. I did want to make sure that I asked you. Do you think that we have made any progress?
Well, let's look at it this way. Things change, but some things are still there. Racism is still there, white supremacy, segregation. It just takes different forms. The only big difference that you might see is you'll have black faces in high places, but the situation is still the same. The same people, the oligarchs that run things, are still in charge. They just roll with the punches and do what they have to do to keep control. Charter schools are no better than public schools, and that's all neoliberal maneuver to get the money involved in public schools and defund public schools and replace them with charter schools and just have enough public schools to get the children that are not wanted by the charter schools. So it is a shame to get rid of public schools, and we've got to do something to make certain that that does not happen.
Well, let me ask you, do you see any hope for the future?
Well, the policy now is to demonize teachers. Well, let me say this. This is not about the teachers that you should be getting rid of are those who are sick individuals, maybe pedophiles, or something in that area.
Right, right.
Most of the children who have social and economic problems have problems with school, most of them. Mm-hmm. If you're poor, if you have social problems that have to do with your community and where you live, if you're homeless, if you are sick, if you're having difficulty with family problems, all these things impact upon children. So the strategy of those who want to take these schools are blaming the teachers. It's not the teachers. It's not the teachers, but that's a good strategy because the teachers are a good target if you want to destroy public schools. All this stuff about bad teachers and whatnot does not have anything to do with what the situation is for the progress of children.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Brother David, for speaking to us and for telling us what we need to know and for writing this beautiful book, Playing the Game. I think it's well worth your time.
And you can get it from Amazon.
There you go. Thanks, folks. And this is the Concerning Forum, signing off.